John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at creation and Sabbath in our continuing study of the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their hosts." Now, as we look at the first few verses of chapter 2, we note that there is a temple theme that is introduced here, but actually it's seen all throughout chapters 1 and 2. Back in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, we saw that God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. When we get to the completion of the tabernacle at the end of the book of Exodus, Exodus chapter 39 and 40, we're going to read almost the same words where Moses is going to look at the completed work of the tabernacle, and Moses saw that they had done the work just as the Lord had commanded. Notice there's a scene, and it was done. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 here, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their hosts." And when we get to Exodus 39:32, "Thus all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting was completed." So again, word for word, what we're going to see is the tabernacle being described in creation terms. But I want to suggest what's happening here is that creation is being described in tabernacle and or temple terms. Likewise, when we get to verse 2, God finished his work which he had done, and Genesis chapter 40, verse 33, "Thus Moses finished the work." In Genesis chapter 2, verse 3, "Then God blessed the seventh day." And when we get to Exodus 39:43, "So Moses blessed them." So there's a blessing, there's a finishing of the work, there's a pronouncement of seeing. All those things take place. He blessed it and he sanctified it. And likewise in Exodus chapter 40, verse 10, God says, he gives some description, "You'll sanctify the altar." And so there's a blessing and a sanctification, both that take place in that culmination. There's a tabernacle/temple theme at the beginning of creation in Genesis chapters 1 and 2. It should come as no surprise that at the end of the Bible, when we get to the book of Revelation, we also close with another temple theme. And that's the entire city of the New Jerusalem is described in terms of a temple, and not only a temple, but a holy of holies, a place where God is. Now, with that in mind, let's look at Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their hosts. By the seventh day God completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done." Notice the repetition. "Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made." Notice how we have the repetition of God. He had done the work, he had completed the work, and he rested, and that's repeated several times. This rest, the way you say that in Hebrew, is a Sabbath, and that's given as a memorial to the work of God in creation, so that there will be eventually a continuing memorial as the Jews are called to remember the work of God in creation. And not only the work, this also served as a memorial of God's redemption. When we get to Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 15, the retelling of the Ten Commandments and the retelling of the commandment about the Sabbath, there's something added where we read that you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath. So the Sabbath both remembers God's creation, but it also remembers God's work of redemption. It is a memorial to both of those. The Sabbath, therefore, was designed to be both a memorial but also a shadow of things to come, and not as an end unto itself. Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 says, "Therefore let no one act as your judge in regard to food or drink, or in respect of a festival or a new moon, or even a Sabbath day, things which are a mere shadow of what is to come." What's making the shadow? The Sabbath is a shadow, but the substance, the shadow maker, belongs to Christ. Eventually, the Sabbath looks forward to the rest that would be ultimately provided when Jesus came and did the ultimate work of redemption upon the cross dying in our place so that we might rest in him.